Alright, so welcome to the Think Out Loud series, where I solve a problem and I share my thought process whilst doing so that you can learn a thing or two. So today we're doing a leetcode problem number 1672. So you have a bunch of customers that have bank accounts represented by these numbers here. So what we want to figure out is what customer has the max wealth. So what we need to do is loop through the customers and then look at their balances and summarize these balances and then compare these values so that we store the customer that has the most wealth and we return the sum of that wealth. So I will first create the simplest solution to read, and then I will create a second version that I prefer. But let's start with the simpler one first. So we need to have two for loops to loop over every balance. So first we loop the customers and then we go into each customer and loop the balance. So I'll do for customer of customers and then another for loop for const balance of customer. So now we'll need some variables to keep track of both the maximum wealth but also the summary of the balances. So I'll call this one max, I'll set that one to 0, and this one sum that I'll also set to 0. And then for each customer we will take the sum and we will do plus equals the balance. And then we need to check if sum is greater than max. Then we set max to be the new value. And then once we've gone through all the customers, we just need to return the max wealth. So now we can test this. Maximum wealth, and we pass in the customers. And if we look at this, we have 60 as a total for the first one, and the second one is 45. So we should expect 60 to come out from here. So we can actually open the debugger, and like if something is wrong with this code, we can always put a breakpoint in it, and then when we run it, it will stop there and we can look at the values and so on. But for this one, I think it should be correct. We get 60. So now let's create a second version of this function. We'll call it maximum wealth reduce, because I will use a function called reduce that is an array function. So I'll do const max, or we can actually return straight away customers.reduce. So what does reduce do? I mean, you can hear it by the name. It takes a list and it reduces it down to something, and in our case we're reducing it down to the max wealth. So it will loop every customer once in a callback function that I specify here. And as input to this function, we get both an accumulator and the current customer. And as a second parameter to reduce, we can set what the accumulator should have for initial value. So we set max in the previous function to be 0, and we're going to do the same thing here. So now from this one, we return a reduce of customer. We'll call this sum and balance. And the sum should start at 0 as well. So instead of accumulator here, I'll call this one max, like we did in the first function. So here I want to add the balance to the sum. sum plus balance. So that will make it so that the balance is added to this accumulator value. So what I get here is the sum. And then I will say if sum is greater than max, return sum. But if it wasn't, then we return max again. So let's try to understand this code. So if we start from within, we are on a customer and we loop each balance once. And here we just need to summarize the balances into a sum. So we start at 0 and then each balance gets added to the sum. And so we get back this sum and we store that in a variable. And that variable is then compared to the current max. And if it's greater, we return that, or else we just return the max. So for this customers reduce, we will either return the current customer that has more wealth, or we will return a previous customer that had some wealth that was stored in the max. Let's try out this one. So we should see the same result here, and we do. So just to make sure that we are correct, let's add a third one that has really high wealth. It should have 135. And it does. So this is how I would like to solve it myself. I mean, the code is not as readable as this, but it's more compact, it's more advanced, and I would opt for this one, even though it's not as readable. I think it's more functional and it's just cleaner. So hope you learned something from this, and let me know in the comments if you want to see more in this format where I think out loud on how I want to solve some little problem. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.